In 2008, SpaceX was running out of money. 3 rockets had already failed, employees were exhausted, investors were losing confidence, and critics believed the company was finished. One more failed launch, and SpaceX might not survive. Today, SpaceX is the most influential space company on Earth. But just a few years earlier, it was a small startup trying to do something many experts believed was impossible. So how did a nearly bankrupt company end up changing spaceflight forever? Before SpaceX existed, spaceflight had become incredibly expensive. Launching a rocket into orbit could cost hundreds of millions of dollars. The industry was dominated by governments and massive aerospace contractors. And after the Apollo era, public excitement around space exploration had slowed down dramatically. To many people, humanity's greatest space achievements already seemed to be in the past. But one person believed the future of humanity depended on returning to space. Elon Musk had become increasingly interested in one idea: making humanity a multiplanetary species, specifically reaching Mars. At first, Musk wasn't trying to build rockets himself. Instead, he attempted to buy old ballistic missiles from Russia for a Mars greenhouse project meant to inspire public interest in space exploration. But negotiations failed. The rockets were far too expensive, and during the trip back from Russia, Musk came to a conclusion that would eventually create SpaceX. The problem wasn't that rockets were impossible. The problem was that they were too expensive to build. In 2002, Musk founded SpaceX. At the time, the idea sounded unrealistic. The space industry was one of the most difficult industries on Earth. Even governments struggled to build reliable orbital rockets. And now, a small startup wanted to compete with established aerospace giants. Many experts dismissed the company immediately, but SpaceX had a different philosophy. Instead of relying on massive bureaucracies and expensive manufacturing systems, they wanted to build rockets faster, cheaper, and more efficiently. The company started with a relatively small team working out of warehouses in California. Early employees described the environment as intense. Long hours became normal. Engineers often slept at work, and almost everyone understood the stakes. Failure was not just possible, it was expected. SpaceX's first rocket was called Falcon 1. Compared to larger government rockets, it was relatively small, but its mission was enormous. If Falcon 1 could reach orbit successfully, it would prove that a private company could build reliable orbital rockets. That had never been done before with a privately developed liquid-fueled rocket. But building rockets is brutally difficult. A tiny engineering mistake can destroy years of work in seconds, and SpaceX was about to learn that reality firsthand. In March 2006, Falcon 1 launched for the first time. For a brief moment, everything appeared normal. Then disaster struck. A fuel leak caused an engine fire shortly after launch. The rocket failed before reaching orbit. Years of work disappeared in minutes. But despite the failure, the company kept going, and SpaceX prepared for another launch. The second Falcon 1 launch came a year later. This time the rocket made it further. But another problem occurred during stage separation. The rocket began spinning uncontrollably and was lost again. 2 launches, 2 failures. Public confidence in the company began collapsing. Many people now believed SpaceX was simply another over-ambitious startup heading toward failure. But the worst moment was still ahead. The third Falcon 1 launch was supposed to be redemption. Instead, it became the company's most devastating setback yet. During stage separation, the stages collided. The mission failed again. And according to several former employees, there may only have been enough funding left for one final launch attempt. If the next rocket failed, SpaceX could die. Falcon 1 Flight 4 became the most important launch in SpaceX history. The pressure was enormous. Years of failures had pushed the company to the edge. Employees understood what was at stake. This was not just another test flight, it was survival. Then, on September 28, 2008, Falcon 1 finally reached orbit successfully. For the first time in history, a privately developed liquid-fueled rocket had successfully entered orbit. Inside Mission Control, engineers erupted into celebration. After years of setbacks, SpaceX had finally proven itself. And the timing could not have been better, because shortly afterward, NASA awarded SpaceX a major contract worth billions of dollars. Now SpaceX could think bigger. The company began developing Falcon 9, a far more powerful rocket capable of carrying larger payloads and eventually astronauts. But SpaceX wasn't only trying to build rockets. They were trying to fundamentally change how rockets worked. Traditionally, rockets were disposable. After launch, massive sections would fall into the ocean and be destroyed, which meant every mission required building entirely new hardware. To Musk and SpaceX engineers, this seemed absurd. It would be like throwing away an airplane after every flight. So SpaceX pursued one of the most ambitious engineering goals in modern aerospace: reusable rockets. At first, many people doubted the idea. Landing an orbital booster vertically sounded almost impossible, but after years of testing and multiple failures, SpaceX finally achieved something extraordinary. a Falcon 9 booster descended from space and landed upright on Earth. The footage quickly became iconic because for the first time, rockets were beginning to behave less like missiles and more like reusable machines. As reusable rockets improved, launch costs began dropping dramatically. And suddenly, the entire space industry had to adapt. SpaceX began launching satellites, cargo missions, military payloads, and eventually astronauts to the International Space Station. The company also developed Starlink, a massive satellite internet network made up of thousands of satellites orbiting Earth. By the early 2020s, SpaceX had become the dominant launch provider on the planet. The same startup that nearly collapsed in 2008 was now reshaping the future of spaceflight. But for Musk, Falcon 9 was never the final goal. The real ambition was always larger. Mars. To help achieve that vision, SpaceX began developing Starship, the largest and most powerful rocket system ever created. Unlike traditional rockets, Starship is designed to become fully reusable. The long-term idea is radical, launching massive numbers of people and cargo into space at dramatically lower costs. Eventually, possibly allowing humans to become a multiplanetary species. Whether that vision succeeds remains uncertain. Starship itself has already experienced multiple dramatic test failures and explosions, but in many ways, that reflects the same pattern that defined SpaceX from the beginning. Failure, iteration, improvement, again and again. Today, SpaceX has permanently changed the space industry. It proved that private companies could compete in space exploration. It helped normalize reusable rockets, and it pushed humanity back toward ambitious long-term space exploration once again. But perhaps the most remarkable part of the story is how close it all came to failure. Because in 2008, one more failed launch might have ended everything. Instead, it became the beginning of a new era in spaceflight.